There's something I want to address that I didn't get around to mentioning in my last review. If you ask just about anyone with any kind of general knowledge of games, the general consensus would be that all the 2D Sonic games were great, and everything after Sonic Adventure just got worse and worse.
God damn it! Why do all my 3D games have to suck?
My purpose with this review series is to see if that view actually holds up. Were all the 2D games worthy of nothing but the highest praise? Are the newer games not worthy of any praise at all? Well, stick with me as we journey through every Sonic game I can find, and hopefully these questions will be made clear. So today we're looking at the next game in this series, Sonic the Hedgehog, for the Sega Master System. By the end of 1991, Sonic for the Genesis was already a runaway success, so Sega decided they didn't want the Genesis's older brother to feel left out. Sadly, Sonic Team was busy with another project, so Sega got someone else to make this one. For a game that shares the same name, this doesn't really have all that much in common with the Genesis counterpart. There's a couple recycled level themes and music tracks here, but it's definitely a different game. The story here is the same. Robotnik trying to create a robotic utopia, and Sonic constantly foiling his plans. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This game gives us a world map that shows where we are, and nothing else. Looks nice, I guess. That brings me to another thing I wanted to point out. I grew up with the NES and completely missed out on the Sega Master. But one of the first things I noticed was how much better the Master looked than the NES. The color palette seems richer, the sound seems better, and the fact that a Sonic game still retains its speed with almost no slowdown is actually pretty impressive. As impressive as the game is, when I play it, I just can't shake the feeling that something is a little off. The controls are tight, mostly. The game still has physics, kinda. And even the music is good, mostly. It becomes apparent pretty quickly that this game was not developed by Sonic Team. The controls, while responsive, still seem just a little off. When jumping, it seems some things are just out of reach when you think you should be able to reach them, while other things are reachable when they should be too high. And ground movement is thrown off by some of the platforms. The hit zone for some platforms seems to be much bigger than it should be. There's moments where in your mind you're expecting to fall and poof, you're up on the platform. Which throws you off because you instinctively press the jump button, making you suddenly jump from the platform you just poofed to, and now you're all thrown off. Then there's other times when you're moving from platform to another platform and actually trying to jump, but Sonic is teleporting up to the new platforms, throwing you off even more. It doesn't really happen that often, but when it does, it kind of takes you out of the game. Other areas of gameplay are changed a bit from the Genesis version as well. You still collect rings, and they still provide a sort of protective barrier against hits. However, in this game, if you do get hit, you not only drop your rings, you lose them. They don't bounce along the ground for a few seconds for you to pick back up. Once you get hit, those rings are gone. To make matters worse, you don't even get the Mercy invincibility, meaning you can die instantly after losing your rings. This combined with very sparse power-ups makes for a pretty challenging game. Just how sparse are the power-ups? I'm glad you asked. Well, the invincibility only shows up twice, once in the very first level, and again later in Labyrinth Zone Act 2, and the speed shoes only appear once in the entire game, in the very first level. Only the shield shows up with some sort of regularity, and even that is pretty well hidden in most levels. Adding even more to the difficulty is the fact that extra lives are at a premium. Not every stage even has a 1-up monitor, and on the stages that do, they are very well hidden. Complicating matters more is the fact that developers didn't program a third digit in the ring counter. Collecting 100 rings still gives you an extra life, but the counter resets to 0, which can complicate things late in the level since you still need 50 rings when you pass the signpost to get to the special stage. Speaking of the special stage, this thing baffles me. You don't find the Chaos Emeralds here, as those are hidden within the main gameplay stages. All you have here is lots and lots of rings, a 1-up monitor, and some other power-up that I can't quite tell what it is by looking at it, and it doesn't really seem to do anything. If you notice at the end of each level, a signpost will give you either an exclamation point if you have enough rings for a special stage, or a picture of Robotnik if you don't have enough. No matter what I try here, in the special stages, I always get the Robotnik sign. I find the 1-up, I find the extra thing, I pass a sign with more than 50 rings, less than 50 rings. It's always Robotnik. What do you want from me? Anyway, the game follows a familiar 3-act structure. However, in the third act is just a short trip to the battle with Robotnik, with no enemies and no rings to collect. So the conflicts with Robotnik are usually pretty challenging. As I mentioned before, the Chaos Emeralds are hidden about in certain stages. But you don't really get anything for finding them all, just a big bonus to your score at the end of the game. In fact, the only hidden items that give you a tangible reward are the extra lives. If you manage to find all of them in the previous levels, then you get a bonus extra life monitor in the final stage of the game. I mentioned in the review for the Genesis version that the balance between speed and slow is what makes a Sonic game fun. Unfortunately, with this version, the scale is tipped a little more to the slow side. There are moments where you get a lot of speed, but they're pretty rare, especially in the later levels. That is mostly due to the level design. They're quite a bit smaller in this version, which is probably because of the limitations of the 8-bit system compared to 16-bit. The areas that don't seem to be hindered by the limitations of the 8-bit format are the graphics and sound. The graphics are very bright and colorful, as you would expect from a Sonic game. Enemies are pretty sparse, but the Sonic sprite still looks good and is well animated. And the levels that are remade for this game are very faithful 8-bit recreations in terms of art style. Performance-wise, the game is still impressive, as it can usually still keep up with Sonic, something I doubt the NES could do. One thing that does still bother me is there are some sections where the camera will suddenly pan to supposedly give you a better view of the next jump. However, it usually happens when I'm already preparing for said jump, and it usually throws me off. This flaw could have been remedied by refining the level design a bit. The last thing I want to touch on is the music. Overall, the soundtrack is pretty darn good. All of the level tracks are good, with a couple of really great standouts. The only track I really don't like is Robotnik's theme. It's kind of jazzy and catchy, but it doesn't really fit. The Genesis version was epic and menacing. It's just not the same. There's a couple of faithful remakes of songs from the Genesis version that still sound good. And there's a couple really good original tracks here. But what else would you expect from renowned chiptune artist Yuzo Koshiro? For those of you who don't immediately recognize the name, Koshiro has also composed soundtracks for ActRaiser, the Streets of Rage series, Beyond Oasis, and many other games. He also helped out with the soundtracks for Shenmue.
Do you know of a place where sailors hang out?
Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and even as recent as Kid Icarus Uprising. A couple of songs from this game have even been sampled by other artists. The jungle track was sampled in a song Accidentally Kelly Street by Australian group Frente! What? There's an exclamation point in their name.
Accidentally Kelly Street, where friends and strangers sometimes meet.
Also, the Bridge Zone, which is my personal favorite, was sampled in a couple other songs as well. It was used in Tails' theme Believe in Myself from Sonic Adventure, and also one that was a bit more popular. I know it sounds like I'm being harsh on this game, but don't let that color your opinion. I do like this game. In 1991, if you still had a Sega Master System but still hadn't quite moved up to the Sega Genesis, you could have done a lot worse than this game. Yeah, it's different and some would say possibly Nintendo hard, but it's still a Sonic game. And while the fact that it wasn't developed by Sonic Team does show at some points, it's definitely worth tracking down if you don't already have it in your Sega Master collection. Or you can download it from the Wii Virtual Console. Why in the hell can I drown on this level but not this level?